This is my Peugeot 307 2007, the facelift model, 1.6 petrol version, TU5 JP4 is the engine, and this is a video of how to replace the rear shock absorbers of the Peugeot 307 2007. Enjoy! First, of course, be safer than sorry. I have put two blocks of wood behind the front left tire, in the front and the back, so the car doesn't go backwards or forward. That's the front left. The rear right also has brick in the front and brick at the back, and the front as well has 2 points. Of course, I'm replacing the rear left on the L side, so I haven't put anything in front of that one. So next thing is to lift the car, and I'm using a jack stand that will hold the car, but first to lift it with this scissor jack that came with the car, and our position is slightly off the point where it's supposed to be. It's not entirely good because this is slightly not so good point. It might bend the steel here, but well, that's what it is. It's just only slightly, just to keep a pressure on it. That's enough. Next is to undo the bolts of the wheel, and I have a security nut here. So start from those, just only slightly. You don't need to undo them entirely. And next thing is to lift the car. Until I can position the jack stand underneath the hole in here, and then lowering down on the jack stand. Next thing is to remove the bolt of the wheel. It's already kind of spinning freely. And then I can remove the wheel and put it underneath the car by the jack stand. So for example, I'll put the wheel underneath here, by the jack stand, so if the car drops, it will drop on the wheel and it will be safer for me. So here's the shock absorber that you can see down here, goes down. And next thing is to undo the bolt that holds the shock absorber to the frame. Next you need to undo that bolt that holds the shock absorber to the frame. This side here is 16mm, this is 13mm, the bolt that goes through, and you have to undo that one. Only a little bit, and then I'll put the jack underneath just to put a little bit of pressure on the shock absorber. Next I'll put the scissor jack just underneath that frame, but just to put a little bit of pressure on the shock absorber here. It's only a little bit of pressure. And that should be quite enough to put a little bit of pressure on, and of course, yeah, you can undo the bolts. There we go, the bolt is out, and the bottom of the shock absorber is pretty free. So now to take it off, the two bolts from the top. And that's why you keep a pressure, just because the shock absorber is not anymore there, just to keep pressure on the suspension, not to drop too much. So the two bolts at the top of the shock absorber are also 16mm, and you have to undo them. They're pretty hefty bolts, but it shouldn't be too bad. You might want to hold on to the shock absorber just in case it moves away, but it can't move anywhere. And that's it. You can just remove the whole shock absorber with the strut here. Now I have the two shock absorbers, well, one side and the other side off, and this is how it looks like. This is the top, the strut, and this is a 16mm bolt inside. and you cannot really say it. Let me show you the other one. You cannot really say it's extremely rusty. So on that one, what the theory is, you kind of make this nice and with a brush or something. It's a 60mm bolt, and you have this go through thing. Then it's a 6mm of these that go through. It's something like that. It's a counter and goes through, and you turn that one side, this keeps it at the same place, and you unscrew it. Well, that's the theory. So you can put that one in there, and it's a bit rusty, of course, so you might have to wiggle it out a little bit like that. You put that inside, you put that in here, and you unscrew it, and that is on the other side, and you screw it that direction, and you hold it somewhere. Okay, you have to have that complete thing in a vise. It's just easier. But what happened with that one, I did that and completely broke it from here. This just didn't want to budge at all, it just broke it completely. So what people do is they have a vise that grips it here, they undo it with a pneumatic gun or air gun or anything. I don't have an air gun, so I cannot do that. So this broke, so that's why I don't want to do it on the other shock absorber, because this will probably break again. And I sprayed here quite a lot of lubricant for unscrewing bolts, knock this out. It just doesn't want to go anywhere. So what I've done, I've bought a new strut, and these are the bolts for that one. But unfortunately there are two for normal suspension and for heavy duty suspension. This is a heavy duty suspension, and you can check out this video to see what the difference is and how to distinguish between these two. So all the components are in the description of the video if you want to see it. So I'll be using a new one, it's a new one. I don't think it will break, but well, it's a new one. The old ones are quite a bit rusty. Well, they're not rusty, they're aluminum, but still kind of rust all around. And I have also bought brand new of these top like a stopper, the same stopper as that one for the shock absorber. So simply you put this inside and it goes like that. You have to lock it in, and there we go, that goes inside. And this is pretty hard, so when the shock absorber compresses really hard, this is kind of a stop not to hit the strut. And that's it. I have my stopper, I have a new strut. So if you have a pneumatic air gun, you might want to undo that. And it's the same thing whether whether you reuse the old one or use a new one, it's the same thing, it's the same procedure. So for the new shock absorber I'm using KYB. I cannot say if it's any good, but that's what was from my car, and that's how it looks like. KYB. You remove that one and you kind of extend a little bit, and that's what's at the end. You have a kind of a rubber, I think it's rubber, a bit of a metal thing to stop, to go in the strut like that, and it stops it from coming down. So it goes like that and it stops it, and then you screw the nut on top, and there is of course a nut there. So here is how it should be done, although I don't have a vise, so I use kind of the floor, but this is how it should be done. So first of all you put in this kind of rubber stopper in there, so when it compresses it will hit this stopper. It's kind of a bumper stopper, so don't forget to put it in. Then of course you put the new strut like that, and then of course you screw in the top nut. And now you have to tighten that nut. I'm not too sure if you can see it. You have to tighten that nut, and this is cut. Hopefully you can see it is cut. So this particular insert can go in there. This particular insert can go in there, and then you have the sleeve on top that you hold here and tightened, and you hold this the counter so it doesn't spin. So you don't put this into a vise, otherwise you just damage it and goes through the seal of the shock absorber. It will just cut it and probably leak. Now for here, this particular bit, you have to have this scroll foot that goes on here like that, and you put a torque wrench. You put a torque wrench in and tighten it. So that's the general principle of that. It goes like that. This is cut, so it goes in the cut for the stem for the shock absorber, and you can kind of turn it around, and this is what this is. So it's 16 millimeter of these go through sockets, and this is 6 millimeters that goes through and grabs onto the shock absorber. And the tightening of that nut is 38 Newton meters. I'll do 40 because it's just slightly tighter, but it's 38 Newton meters. I mean, people would use a pneumatic air gun and just tighten it. I suspect there is no problem, but it should be tightened to 38 Newton meters. So this is how this is supposed to be done. So you can put in your go through here on the side that goes in the slot here to stop it counter rotation. Then you put in your go through on the nut. So I'll have a crow's foot here to kind of tighten it, or you can use something like that initially, but then with a torque wrench, this crow foot, you can put in the torque wrench here and turn it, and it will be torqued to 40 Newton meters. So we'll put a counter on here, so kind of to stop the inside rotating. Then you turn in that one, and that should be it. You should be able to kind of hold it and turn it. There we go. I tighten it and not too sure, so now how much is 40? Let me put the torque wrench and do it to 40 Newton meters. There we go. And it has to be 40. Well, let's see. There we go. $40 Newton meters. Remove the crow foot, remove that one, remove this one. So that's nice and secure now, and it's 40 Newton meter. Here is how the cut is. Then this stopper needs to go inside there. You need to push it, so kind of to protect the stem from rusting and so on, to not to go in there. So the next thing is what I'll do. Actually, I'll jump pack this with grease, because next time if I wanna do that, to undo it and put a new one or something, not to get so rusty, or the next person, well, probably nobody will ever undo that, but I'll jump pack it with grease, just a generic kind of grease. So there we go. I put quite a bit of grease inside, so this won't rust, and inside the nut won't rust. So next person that wants to do that will be quite easier to do. I mean, the grease will just stop water, any water incoming in there. I mean, there's supposed to be a stop here that you put a plastic thing on top, but I haven't found it even on eBay or anywhere else that you can buy it, and maybe the manufacturers didn't put it either. So one last thing, that's the new shock absorber. You need to pump it like 10 times in order to activate it, to start the oil moving around inside, and simply you push it till the bottom, and then you release it until it comes to the top, and do that 10 times. And now the whole shock absorber is ready to be put on the car. Next thing, before putting the new shock absorber in, you want to clean these surfaces a little bit from all sides. Just a brush. And next thing, you have to put a little bit of grease on the inside, on the surfaces here, And I have a generic, you just put a little bit on the insides where the shock absorber surface goes in, like that. And next, putting the shock absorber. Put the shock absorber in there. Like that. And then of course, screw in the, I might have to change hands, screw in the two bolts. And then tighten it a little bit, not too much, because this will be torqued with a torque wrench once the bottom of the shock absorber has been done and the car has been lowered. Then I'll tighten these, torque them when the car is on the ground. Now at the bottom, then of course the bolt goes like that. The nut is on the inside. I mean, you have to use a new bolt, but I don't have a new bolt, so it will be the old one. There we go. To do a good fit. And then of course you tighten it. You don't tighten it fully, only pre-tighten. Then when the car is dropped, I'll torque them. That should be alright for the moment. And I'll torque them when the car has been lowered. Now you can undo the jack, let it down a little bit, the suspension, and put the wheel on with the bolts. And the wheel with the bolts. You tighten the bolt very slightly. Not very slightly, but a little bit. And then you lower the car. Raise it a little bit to get out the jack stand. And then you lower it. Now you torque them to the bolts to 57 Newton meters, and it's a bit awkward, the car is on there, so I'll stick in the torque wrench and turn it. It's a bit awkward, but it's not too bad. Could be of course worse. That's 57, that one. Double check, and then the other one as well. And these two bolts are torqued 57 Newton meters, and the bolt down below is 62 Newton meters. Then of course you do the bolts 90 Newton meters, crisscross that one, then that one, that one, that one, until you've done 19 Newton meters.